For today's video, I'll be sharing my personal experiences and results when using Chinese aquarium lights on my low-tech planted tanks. I get a few people reaching out every month asking how these lights perform and whether they're really worth the money, so I thought I'd make a dedicated video going over it. For full transparency, this video isn't sponsored in any way, none of the brands know I'm even making this video, but I have done some sponsored stuff with some of these brands in the past. To start off, I want to quickly cover some of the main Chinese aquarium light brands so we're all on the same page of what I'm talking about. In my fish room, every single tank is running a light from one of 4 brands that I've used directly, which are Chihiros, Hygger, Nicrew and Seaoura. Beyond that, 2 other popular names in the hobby are Weak Aqua and AQQA. I have absolutely no experience with Weak Aqua at all, but since AQQA and Hygger are the same company, I have some indirect experience with them via their Hygger products. Altogether, these brands cover every single budget you can imagine, from an absolute beginner with an entry-level budget up to a high-end aquascaper who has thousands to spend for a single tank, so there's something in here for everyone. Moving on, and I want to share some examples of my own planted tanks to give you a clear idea of what these lights are actually able to achieve in low-tech planted setups. Just to be clear, none of my tanks run CO2 systems, I don't dose liquid fertilizers, and I haven't in months in any of my tanks. The substrate is either Fluval Stratum aqua soil or capped dirt. I'll also tell you exactly how old each tank is, because with low-tech planted tanks, time really is a very important factor. So starting with this, which is my 40 gallon or 160 litre planted community tank, which is 153 days old. It has recently had a little bit of a rescape, so most of the Echinodorus and Lagonandra plants in here are still grown in. Unlike all of my other tanks, this one does run 2 different lights, and it runs a Hygger 957 and a Nicrew C10, both at max intensity for 6 hours per day, with Fluval Stratum as the substrate. Next up are my tanks running Seaoura SR616 lights, which are very affordable, beginner friendly, and it's often the light that I currently recommend to people new to the hobby, and I will leave an affiliate link in the description. This is my Walstad cherry shrimp and guppy tank, which is 494 days old, and it runs a Seaoura SR616 at max intensity for 6 hours per day, and the substrate for this one is capped dirt. This is my pearlweed jungle tank, which is 472 days old. It also runs a Seaoura SR616 using capped dirt as a substrate, and the light is at max intensity for 6 hours per day. My Endless Life Bearer tank is due its maintenance later today, and it's currently 143 days old, and again it's using an SR616, max intensity, 6 hours per day with a capped dirt substrate. Then we have my Walstad Medaka tank, which is only 56 days old at the time of recording, and it runs a SR616, max intensity, 6 hours per day, capped dirt substrate. So moving into the middle range options, and I've used several Hygger, Nicrew and Seaoura models over the years. Keep in mind that some of the lights that I am currently using in my fish room are the older versions, but they're still solid performers, but I would personally recommend a newer version just for the energy efficiency. The release order for these is the Hygger 957, which is the oldest light. Then around 18 months after its release, the Hygger HG76 came out, which is very similar in its output, but does require less energy to provide that output. And then we have the Seaoura SR659, which is currently rolling out and has the highest specs of all 3 of these. So this is my room temperature white cloud mountain minnow tank, which is 363 days old and uses a Hygger HG76 set to max intensity, 6 hours per day with Fluval Stratum aqua soil as its substrate. This is my jungle betterfish tank, which is 187 days old. It runs a Hygger 957. I have tweaked the settings playing with the DLI method, where I extend the photo period and turn the light and intensity down a bit, but I'm still playing around with that. This is my brand new Ember Tetra and Pygmy Corydoras tank, which is 15 days old and is running a Seaoura SR659 max intensity for 6 hours per day right now. Just to quickly note, this specific tank uses a plant-based cycle rather than microorganisms, so the stem plants in the back are able to deal with the bioload and keep everything safe. Finally, we get to the Chihiros AII series, and I consider this and the Twin Star B series to be the upper end of the price bracket for the low-tech planted tank side of the hobby. I know if you're on the aquascaping side of the hobby, these are classed as entry-level lights, but I do consider both sides of the hobby different. In my honest opinion and my experience, these are probably more powerful than most people need on the low-tech side of the hobby. As I've mentioned in a few of my recent videos, I've had to run these as low as 30 to 40% max intensity just to keep algae under control, but I am slowly ramping their intensity back up to see if I can get the red plants in these tanks to colour up. So this is my Walstad betta fish tank, which is 77 days old and uses a Chihiros AII, but I have had to adjust the settings frequently because of algae. This is my Walstad cherry shrimp tank, which is 76 days old and also runs a Chihiros AII, again with varying light intensities and photo periods to manage the algae. Then we have my Celestial Pearl Danio tank, which is 55 days old and has the exact same story, with the settings having to be changed a lot to manage algae. So hopefully that's a realistic picture of how all these different lights perform across tanks with varying ages and different intensities of the light. And just to reiterate, none of my tanks use CO2 systems, and the newer ones have never had any liquid fertilizations, and the older ones that haven't had it for months. So next up, I want to touch on plant suitability with these lights, because modern LEDs are far better than the older lighting systems for the most part. Even the affordable entry-level Seaoura SR616 performs very well and has been able to easily grow every easy category plant that I've tried with it, quite a few medium category plants, and even one advanced category plant from the Tropica category listing. Now if you are new to the hobby and curious how I work out the difficulty category of each plant, I just use the free Tropica or Denelay plant indexes, and I link to both in the video description. They are slightly different with their category recommendations, and in my experience Tropica is more accurate, but even then they say things like pearlweed's advanced. In my experience it's a very easy plant to grow. With red plants becoming more popular on the low-tech planted tank side of the hobby, I do suggest that you try and step up to something like the Seaoura SR659 if possible. Again, this light is literally in the middle of its rollout right now, so it's only available in a few countries, but that should be fully rolled out by the end of 2025. As you can see here though, in 2 weeks it's got the majority of my Rotala Blood Red in this tank to colour up. Credit where it's due though, Rotala Blood Red is one of the easiest red plants to keep in the hobby, along with Ludwigia Mini Super Red. If you're new, I would recommend either of those for your tanks. So moving on, and we get to build quality, design and control, because a lot of people assume that since these are more affordable Chinese brands, the quality must be bad. But in all honesty, that really hasn't been my experience. I've accidentally knocked my Hygger 957s and my Seaoura SR616s into the water of my tanks multiple times during maintenance, and they all still work perfectly fine, but they are not fully waterproof, so remove them as soon as they fall in. Unfortunately, I did lose one of my Nicrew C10s after it got dunked, and it just had issues within days of being dunked underwater, but that is my only real failure. And the Nicrew C10 is a very old light these days, so I don't actually recommend it anymore. Because I am a little clumsy when it comes to maintenance, I've also dropped a lot of these lights on the floor too, and again, none of them have broken from that, they still work perfectly fine. I do think this is mainly because these lights don't have moving parts like something like an aquarium filter where the impeller could get damaged if it does fall out when turned on or something like that, but it is nice to know they can take a little bit of punishment without breaking. So in terms of the mounting systems, and most of these lights do follow the standard adjustable support legs system rather than the clip-on system. The only exception is the clip-on 6-watt Hygger lights that I use on my shrimp jars, but this is a niche use case, and if you're going with aquariums, I wouldn't recommend these lights. It is mainly for shrimp jars that I use them. Now within the mounting systems of my lights there are two different versions of the legs, and they do have advantages over each other. These adjustable legs are more convenient in my opinion because you can slide them out to meet the needs of your tank size, and if you're running a tank that uses a lid, you have a higher chance of getting this type of light to work with your lid on. But something like the Hygger HG76 or the Chihiros AII has a fixed mount which isn't adjustable, so you have to get the exact right size for your tank. But the advantage of that system is that the light has been specifically designed for a tank of that size, so the light coverage is perfect across all of the corners of the tank, whereas with the adjustable legs, you might end up getting light issues in each corner of your tank. When it comes to control things really do start to get messy when you get up to the mid-range low-tech planted tank size lights and above. Thankfully, all of the entry-level ones use a very similar, simple, basic controller which is very easy to use. The control options are limited, but the majority of them these days will let you change your photo period and light intensity and then turn the light on and off, which is enough for the vast majority of beginners. But when you move up to the mid and higher price point models, the control for every single light seems to be different, so every time you try a new model, you have to relearn the system. It does get confusing and it really annoys me, and I wish the brands would just stick with one option and put it on all of their mid and high range lights. But Chihiros do handle this differently because there's no onboard controls for the light, and I know that's controversial, some people don't like that, but they are designed to use the Chihiros app. Personally, I actually quite like this because it makes it very simple. You log into the app, the user interface is very simple on every single light regardless of model, so even if you are trying a new Chihiros model light, it's kinda similar to work out what you need to do to get it to do what you want for your tank. In reality, the majority of people do seem to only have 1 or 2 tanks anyway, so this won't be a major issue, but if you are keeping multiple tanks, it can get very annoying having to learn the control system for a lot of different models. So moving on, and we get to reliability and longevity, and this is one of the bigger concerns that I get from people when they ask questions about these more affordable Chinese aquarium lights. My original Hygger 957 has been running for over 2 years now without issue, and I also have a Nicrew C10 and a second Hygger 957 that's coming up to the 2-year mark. As far as I can tell, they all run perfectly fine, but to be clear, I don't have a par meter or a lumen meter, so I can't measure output degradation over time or anything like that, but I do go by how my plants perform, and I haven't noticed any decline in the plants in these tanks. My older Seaoura SR616 lights are around 18 months now, and they are still working great. Again, I haven't noticed any degradation in their output, and the plants haven't to struggle or anything like that either. But for this section, overall, when you factor in the far more affordable price point and the length of time I've used them, I'm really happy with the performance I'm getting. A few of my friends use these as well, and they don't have any issues either. So moving on, and we get to technical specifications for the Chinese aquarium light, and like I said back at the start, there's a huge range of brands covering pretty much every single price point you can dream up, so I really don't think people will struggle to find what they want. As I mentioned earlier, the Seaoura SR616 is an excellent entry-level light option for the low-tech planted tank side of the hobby, at least at the time of recording, and I use a lot of them in my tanks. I honestly do think that'll be perfectly fine for a lot of people new to the hobby, unless you specifically want red plants. Then you will need to up your intensity, so you'll be looking at something like the Hygger 957, Hygger HG76, or ideally the Seaoura SR659 because it does have the best stats out of those 3. Moving up from there, we get to the Chihiros A2 series and the Twin Star B series, which personally at least I consider at the absolute upper end of the price bracket for low-tech planted tanks. As I mentioned though, I really don't think most people need this upper end light for a low-tech tank. I kinda do regret buying mine, and like I said, I'm running it at 50% to 60% intensity right now. It has been as low as 30 to 40% intensity, so if you do the calculations, if I can't get it up to 100% intensity, I'm just paying a lot more for a light with a similar lumen output to some of the more affordable mid-range lights. Moving on, and we get to criticisms of Chinese aquarium lights, and while there are a few of these out there that personally I don't agree with, there's definitely some that are 100% legitimate in my opinion. The first one, by far, is the terrible naming conventions of these lights. That's because a lot of models of lights from Hygger, Nicrew and Seaoura just seem to add a random string of numbers with very little consistency across their product lines. This makes it confusing for people to follow along with the newest releases and make sure they are getting the best light for their money. A good example of this is the Hygger 957, which is the older light, and then the Hygger HG76, which offers similar performance at a similar price but better energy efficiency, which is the newer light, and I honestly don't understand how you're meant to look at those two numbers and work out the HG76 is newer than the 957. In contrast though, Chihiros do have a far better naming convention system with their A series range and the WRGB series range and stuff like that. It's just a lot clearer to understand what you're actually getting. But speaking of the Chihiros WRGB range, that brings me on to my second criticism, and that's misleading product naming when it comes to the Chihiros WRGB series. In the aquascaping world, WRGB doesn't just mean the light has white, red, green and blue LEDs, it usually means the light specifically has 4 independently controlled channels for each colour. For example, the Chihiros WRGB2 Pro clearly says on its sales page that it has 4 independent channels for white, red, green and blue LEDs, which is exactly what someone should expect. But then you look at the regular Chihiros WRGB2 and then the WRGB2 Slim and the story changes. Despite the word WRGB literally being in the name of the light and on the box, these lights are only 3-channeled models with independent control for red, green and blue. Now this probably doesn't sound like a big deal to people on the low-tech side of the hobby, but when you factor in how expensive these lights are and how many aquascapers aren't aware of this, it is a big issue in my opinion. There are some forums of people getting frustrated on the Chihiros forums as well, of people who've bought these and felt misled, and in one thread the Chihiros support literally responds, typing out the word WRGB in their reply, then a few words later saying this is just an RGB light. Technically, I think this is a case of buyer beware because it does clearly say that they are just 3-channel lights on their sales page, but personally I'm 100% against this type of marketing tactic and I don't agree with it at all. Anyway guys, that brings the article to an end. I hope it's been helpful. Thanks for watching, but like I said throughout the video, I honestly think the entry-level affordable lights from Seaoura and Hygger are great buys. The Nicrew Slim 2 is probably a solid option too, but like I said, I've never used it because it doesn't have a 6-hour photo period. Anyway, thanks for watching and good luck with your aquarium lights.